Chandler for a moment. Chandler, once you choose a victim, target, defendant, whatever, however you want to
Your words, not mine.
Yes. Payday, in your case. What challenges are you facing at the various stages? Pleadings, discovery, class certification. What are kind of the hot issues that you're having to deal with and struggling with?
Well, at the pleading stage, I'll say this. In general, I think, and the plaintiff's bar thinks as well, I'm not sure, the defense bar is still kind of trying to force the idea that this isn't happening, but I think we are starting to see a shift in the judiciary in terms of them accepting the fact that these types of breaches are affecting people in a way that confers standing on them. And so even a couple of years ago, we were having a lot of challenges at the pleading stage of losing on Article III standing or statutory standing issues, meaning that we couldn't show that our plaintiff and the putative class had been affected in any way by the breach. So we'd go to court and we'd say, well, these folks are at risk of future harm because their information's been exposed. And courts would say, well, that's a little bit too speculative. There's been a kind of shift in the perception of the courts, and I think a lot of it has to do with just the fact that these issues have entered the public narrative in a way that now judges care. They say, wait a minute, yeah, I don't want people to have my diagnosis information, publicized to the world, so I understand how this could be a cognizable harm. So the standing issue, and I might get some counter-arguments from on the defense bar, but that's becoming a hurdle that we were able to surmount. In terms of challenges at class cert, and this is something we want to talk about, there's been a lot of folks in the past couple of years who say, yeah, maybe you'll get past the pleading stage in a data breach litigation. And this often then forces a company to settle because they don't want to get into discovery and potentially have the email come out that says, hey, we should be encrypting so-and-so's data, but we're not. And the person says, oh, well, screw it, we'll handle it later. That's the type of smoking gun evidence that no one wants to get out. So oftentimes there's a lot of pressure for a company to settle right after the pleading stage. But we're seeing increasingly now some companies are willing to fight. And so there's always been an open question whether or not you can certify a class after the pleading stage. And for those who don't know much about class actions, after you plead your case, you have to explain to the judge why the case should be treated as a class action rather than individual suit. And you have to satisfy a number of different factors. And one of them is that everyone is kind of affected in the same way. And so there's a very interesting case that just came out a few weeks ago out of the West Virginia Supreme Court. I know some people kind of roll their eyes and say, West Virginia Supreme Court, what does that matter? It's a great state. I've driven through there like 3 times. And one of the things that the Supreme Court said in this decision where they reversed a lower court's decision denying class certification is that, well, 2 things. One is that if all of these folks, it was a data breach involving the exposure of patient's information, if all these folks had their privacy rights invaded and they have a legal right or they have a privacy right to the confidentiality of the medical records, then that is cognizable under the law. And the second thing the court said that was interesting is they said, and if that is the case, if everyone's had their privacy invaded in the same way, it's all been exposed, the exposure arises out of the same conduct, then it might be well suited for a class action because you only have to resolve kind of the facts of that one, the one instance where the information was exposed. And I'm sure others will have some counter arguments. But those are 2 challenges we faced in the past, the pleading stage and at class cert. We kind of forecasted what might be some problems, and we're seeing there's potential there to be overcome in the future.